Thank you for allowing me to present my slides to you and analyze your business. Let's get right into it. First off, we have the agenda slide. This consists of everything that we'll be going over throughout the duration of my presentation. Starting off with the problem, then an analysis of your business using the say order analytical tool, then a conclusion and summary, then any questions and concerns that you may have. The problem: what plants should Ferris Farms grow and how should you allocate them? The situation at hand. Ferris Farms is thinking about starting a vertical farm located outside of Calgary, Alberta. You have land to build 5 large greenhouses. You have a building that could potentially hold 50 vertical farming frames, totaling a capacity of 10,800 plants. You are considering purchasing equipment from Sky Urban Solutions or ZipGrow Inc., who you have already purchased a financial planner from, as well as you have decided to limit your planting to greens, herbs, and strawberries. Now to analyze your situation, we must decipher whether the market is attractive or not using the Porter's 5 Forces analytical tool. Starting off with the power of suppliers. The power of suppliers is high because there's very few vertical farm manufacturers. There's one manufacturer located in Singapore, being Sky Urban Solutions, and the other is located in Canada, being ZipGrow Inc. The power of buyers is low because Ferris Farm plants are locally grown and fresher than alternatives. Therefore, buyers generally are willing to pay more for fresh local greens and fruits. The threat of substitutes as well is low because you're in the fresh, locally grown plants industry, and many substitutes are imported from different countries. Ferris Farm plants will be fresher and filled with more nutrients. The threat of new entrants is also low because it takes a lot of capital, land, and building to tap into this market. You must be near a large market and have adequate demand and buyers for your products, such as grocery stores and individual consumers. The rivalry is also very low because your barrier to entry is very high. There is little existing rivalry in the fresh local plants industry, and due to harsh winter conditions, local rivals are unable to produce in the winter. There's no existing vertical farms nearby. The Porter's 5 Forces concludes that the vertical farming industry is an attractive market with lots of potential upside and little competition. Ferris Farms should pursue this business venture. Here I have conducted a slide that demonstrates the positives and negatives of each potential product. Green being good and red being bad. Starting off with greens, they are easy to grow, sold for low prices, consistent consumer needs, but typically take 4 to 6 weeks to grow. Moving on to herbs, they are a higher value crop than greens. They offer continuous yield. They are relatively easy to grow, although they take a long time to mature. And as for strawberries, they require more skill to grow and harvest, require a greater amount of labor, and are prone to pests and diseases. Our key takeaway from the slide is that strawberries are of little value to Ferris Farms. From our conclusion on the previous slide, we can conclude that either greens or herbs, or maybe both, are our best options. So here I have conducted a VRIO analysis on greens and herbs. As you can see, greens and herbs share similarities in the rare, imitable, and organized sectors. They are both imitable and not imitable because they are easy to grow in the summer. Therefore, they are imitable in the summer, but can become difficult in the winter as equipment needed increases. Now, if I can turn your attention to the value of greens and herbs, greens have short expiration date, locally produced, faster shipping times, creating a longer shelf life than imports. In contrast, herbs have a long expiration, therefore there's no local competitive advantage over imports, and shipping times are negligible. Our real conclusion is that greens have a smaller shelf life than herbs, therefore Ferris Farms will have a greater comparative advantage in the production of domestic greens over imported greens. The 5 Ps. Starting off with our product. Since greens have a short shelf life, Ferris Farms has a competitive advantage selling local due to quick shipping times, increasing their shelf life. Ferris Farms should also establish contracts ahead of time and focus on selling one item at a time. And as for price, you must sell your greens at a premium price because you're delivering a premium quality product. This will increase revenue and maintain an adequate revenue to cost ratio. Promotion. Because Ferris Farm greens are local and organically grown with no herbicides, promoting this identity is a great option. An option could be to brand it with local and organic Alberta greens. And as for place, you should grow only at the farm and focus all the attention on farm production and distribution so no distractions can arise. And as for people, I made an imaginary person named Sarah that generalizes to a large percentage of your target audience. If you have any questions about Sarah, please feel free to ask me during the question slide at the end. Here I have provided some alternative options using the mutually exclusive, collectively exhausted approach. 1 being do nothing and 5 being get out of this business. And in between, we have 2, plant 1 category of plant at a time, 3 being plant 2 categories of plant at a time, and 4 being plant all 3 categories of plants at the same time. Here is a decision matrix that allows us to decipher which is the best alternative. Our alternatives are listed from 1 to 5 along the left side, and our criterion labeled across the top that will help us decide which alternative is best. Our criterion being ease of production, production efficiency, less distractions, and meets consumers' demand. If I can turn your attention to alternative number 2, we can infer that planting 1 category of plant at a time is the most efficient and effective method. Now, before we move on, we must decipher what plant you're going to produce and export. So moving on to the next slide, I have conducted a second decision matrix to decide which product is of most value to you. So again, our alternatives listed along the left side, 1 being greens, 2 being herbs, 3 being strawberries, and our criterion to help us decide which alternative is best, labeled across the top with easy to grow, requires little labor, short shelf life, meaning greater comparative advantage, and meets consumers' demand. Now we can see that option 1 complies with all the provided criterion, demonstrating the best and most effective option. Now for a timeline, I believe that you should start contacting local stores and markets immediately to establish customers and recurring revenue. In the short term of your business, based on my recommendations, I think you should start planting greens and allocating all your time to perfecting the process of growing these greens. In the medium term, I believe you should continue building brand recognition and supplying fresh greens to local consumers such as grocery stores. And in the long term, you should begin to consider planting other plants and scaling your business. Start thinking about selling to a broader consumer base and expanding production. Moving on to risks, I have provided if you so choose to execute a different strategy. Risk 1 being lack of comparative advantage or competitive edge over imported and rivaling goods. Risk number 2 being a loss of revenue following suboptimal means of production and distribution. Risk number 3 being your production and distribution may not meet consumer demand. Risk 4 is that little to no social license to operate should you decide to pursue alternative means of production or promotion and branding. As you can see, I have listed their impact using the y-axis and their likelihood using the x. As you can see, risk number 1 has the most impact and likelihood. So if I can turn your attention to risk number 1, we can see that, like I've mentioned before, because you're selling local, you will maintain a competitive advantage over your competitors. But if you so choose to go a different route, you risk losing that edge. Now for my summary and conclusion, my analysis drew the conclusion that you should focus only on producing greens to boost efficiency and optimization. This will allow you to allocate all your time to refining and improving the process of producing greens. Should you follow my recommendation, my timeline provides an adequate time frame on when and how to pursue such actions. If you're considering alternative options, my risk slide outlines possible roadblocks you may face and how they may affect you. That concludes my presentation. Now open the floor to any questions.